Hi, class. Um, Again, welcome to this virtual space. This is a lesson on chapter 4. I am going to go through the slides rather quickly because I am asking you to read chapter 4. I didn't make that note for chapter 2 on Carl Jung. I feel like the slide presentation and the activities that you did for Carl Jung would suffice. But I am asking you to read chapter 4 on Alfred Adler. So I'm going to go rather quickly through the slides and just make note or highlight. I'm going to highlight points, but asking you to go back into the chapter to read a more in-depth understanding. And then I'll explain in detail the assignment for this chapter. This is going to be the assignment for the chapter. Adler is known for his lifestyle assessment. It is a tool that can be used in a counseling format, and also a tool that can be used on yourself, which is what the assignment's going to be, in helping you to gain a better understanding of self. He believed that this lifestyle assessment, these questions that are on the assessment, when they are explored, it gives you a better view of self. I did enjoy learning about Adler. When I was in grad school, I actually decided to specialize in Adlerian theory because I liked his holistic approach to the theory of self. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the slide presentation, then we're going to come back to this slide, and then I will explain in more detail on this assignment that you're going to be doing. Okay, so I think that when we are learning about theorists, right, we talked about on the first day of class how our background, our culture, our family of origin, like all of the things that encompass us affect how we view the world. And so I think that when you learn about the history of the theorists, it helps you kind of get an idea on how they came up or how they formulated their theory on personality. And so with Adler's life, he felt inferior to his older brother, which you'll see when we talk about his theory. There's a lot about the inferiority complex. He also had an illness that caused him to be really sickly. And so he also talks about, as we learn about Adler, he talks about how childhood experiences, like those the ones that stand out to you, right? Like the ones that you can remember. If I were to say to you, what do you remember about when you were 5 years old or 6 years old? Like those stories that you remember, those recollections are playing a role in your life, in your present life. And he was he was born in a middle-class Jewish family, and he was the second of 6 children. And Adler talks a lot about birth order and how the order that we are born into a family plays a significant part on our personality as well. So you can see how the parts of Adler's theory are really heavily influenced by his life, as you would have noticed with Carl Jung, and as you would have noticed with Sigmund Freud as well. And as you will notice with the next chapter on Karen Horney, her life as well. And I think when we're talking about psychoanalytic, right, when we're talking about the psychoanalysis theorists, which are the ones that we're covering right now, a lot of their reflection on their life was a significant role in how they saw life in general. Okay, so like I was saying, Adler had has this, are believed in the notion of the inferiority complex, like that we're all striving, all of human society is striving to be the ideal self, right? And when we are not that ideal self, if we do not, well, we're always striving to become the ideal self, right? So it's the journey to become the ideal self. So that process, if you're not going through that process in a healthy way, you develop an inferiority complex. And I thought that this comic really says it all. He can't come to terms with being smaller than the cat, you know, because part of becoming your ideal self would include your negatives and your strengths and your weaknesses, the negatives and the positives. That's how you become your best self, is when you accept all parts of you. And so inferiority complex is where I want to become this ideal self, but I want to become this ideal self and not accept all parts of me. And so it creates a complex. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the inferiority complex, because it's a term that's used a lot in pop culture, actually, but that comes from Adler's theory. And so one of the unhealthy ways that the inferiority complex can take place is striving for superiority. So it's like, I'm going to overcompensate for these areas that I can't accept about myself. I'm going to overcompensate for them, right? Or I'm going to guard them and be on the defense if someone was to acknowledge them or make note of them, right? So it's like I'm overcompensating, I'm overdoing it to try to overshadow my inferiority of these parts of me that I am unable to accept. And so he bases this theory, like that this inferiority complex comes from how we were raised, right? So like our childhood influences, like, for example, the birth order, like I was sharing with you, he bases it off of that. He bases it off of childhood recollections. How, and what I mean by recollections is how you perceived your childhood, how you perceived how your parents treated you, your community treated you and whatnot, as a child. He bases it off of your adolescent years, and that now that's expanding a little bit more with your peers and how you were treated among your peers and recognized among your peers for who you were as a person. And then adult challenges, right? Like now we're adding career and family. When I mean family, I mean marriage, our significant other. And so when we don't feel stable in these, like if each part of the root, like the childhood, the adolescent, the adult, if each stage had these challenges, right, that negatively influence us, it creates the inferiority complex. That is his the basis of his theory. So a lot of his theory is based on social interests, right? Like one of Adler's quotes, all failures are so because they lack social interests. And so when you are not connected socially to a community, to your family of origin, to something, Adler believes that this creates abnormalities, which creates which creates the inferiority complex. So Adler's way of identifying where someone is on this continuum is through assessing their family life. So that's their birth order, the family. What I mean by family constellation would be like, how were your parents enmeshed with the children, or was there strain in the home? Like what was the makeup of the home? Was it just a single mom? Was it a single dad? How many children were in the home? And then the atmosphere would be like the energy of the home. And then the creative self would be, okay, now how did all of those things play out in you becoming you? What did you take from it, and how did you become you from your family life? And from that, he believes you either go into 4 different types. You're either socially useful, which means like you are integrating socially in a healthy manner. Or you are avoiding life, or you're just out to get what's mine in life, or you're trying to overpower everyone in life. And so again, so it plays out in a healthy person has healthy social interests, healthy social interactions. A neurotic person is overcompensating, which is that inferiority, superiority complex. So our life task, Adler believes, and our purpose in life which is why I was sharing with you, I gravitated to his theory, is because I resonate and I believe in this as well, that we are holistic beings. And so life tasks are social, spiritual, self, work, and love. And so when you are not feeling like you are achieving this in a healthy way, this is where that neurosis can come in, and where you begin to develop inferiority complex and trying to gain these life tasks, but you're trying to do it in an unhealthy way. Okay, so Adler, like I was sharing, believed in the birth order. And these are some characteristics that he saw in how the birth order shaped personality. There has been research done on his birth order theory, and I'll share a little bit about the results of that towards the end. I would say my experience of working with people in the field, that I am typically able to identify a firstborn and an only child, but I think that sometimes the middle and the last sometimes that can be not as accurate, and I'm not saying that it didn't show that in research. I'm saying in my experience in working in the field, but typically the firstborn, the only, I can typically identify. But sometimes the youngest, when you are the youngest child, sometimes some of those characteristics can be seen in the only child as well. And sometimes they can be seen in the middle child. And it also just depends also if it's just 2 siblings or 3 siblings versus, when you learned about Adler, he had 6. So the more siblings you have, the more you probably do see the birth order play out versus when you have a smaller amount. All right, so Adler's questions about human nature. He believed that we had free will. We were primarily influenced by nurture. And so if you recall with Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, with Sigmund Freud, he believed it was all nature. It was like biological. You can't help. It's who you are because of who birthed you, right? And who raised you. Versus Carl Jung comes in and he's like, well, no, I think it's actually a little bit of both. And with Adler, he's saying, well, I actually think that it's nurture. So what he means by that is, yeah, you can come from a sucky background, but if you're nurtured properly and you are surrounded by healthy social interests, that it can still be a positive outcome. And so he focuses on the past and the present. Emphasis is placed on uniqueness. And that uniqueness is that creative self that we were talking about in the other slide. Because your creative self is how you perceived what you see happening around you as you're growing up, and how you're perceiving it is how you're forming your ideal of self, if that makes sense. He believes humans use childhood experience to create styles of life, and he's optimistic about life. So the assessments that Adler uses when this is utilized in a counseling or therapeutics setting is he focuses on early recollections. It helps to bring meaning to your present life. He also focuses on dream analysis. And he involves feelings regarding a current problem and how your dreams may be speaking to you about that, like providing you with what's in your subconscious about that. And he also does the lifestyle assessment that I was talking about. Some criticism on Adler's assessing is that, and which was the same criticism that we have found in Sigmund Freud and in Carl Jung, is it's based off of the therapist's intuition from like studying a case. So some of the things that his research did influence was on the social interests and how the research has shown that social interest does play a part in mental wellness and mental health, and that children who are neglected, that does show up in the form of mental illnesses, depression and anxiety, to be an example. His research also showed how children who were pampered tend to have low self-esteem and lack empathy for others. So this was the research I was sharing with you that has been done on birth order, and these were the things that that his research showed. And actually, as I'm looking at this, I'm realizing it was the same that I was talking about, the firstborn and the only born. And this was some of the findings. So let's critique. We're not going to be able to critique because we are not in an in-person setting, and I'm not going to require you to do your own critique of Adler. Like I said, I'm going to give you a different assignment for him. And we can't apply because we're not in the classroom. We were going to apply it by first watching a video demonstration of how an Adlerian therapy could be, how Adlerian therapy is done in a counseling setting. And then we were going to kind of practice, not practice, but just I was going to show you some examples of that in the classroom. But because we're not able to do that, I am going back to the beginning so that I can explain the lifestyle assessment. And so I am asking you to do a lifestyle assessment on yourself. Now, this example that I'm giving you is, you don't have to use this one. If you Google Adler's lifestyle assessment, there's a PDF version you can find, and you can follow that one. There are many versions out there, and so it doesn't, and what I mean by versions, like revised versions where they ask the questions differently, and that is fine. Whatever you feel more comfortable using as your guideline, you're still going to answer all of the questions, the same questions. And so what you're going to do is you're going to do a lifestyle assessment on yourself. Data collection is basically you're collecting data on the following: your demographics, like where were you born and raised? Developmental milestones would be like, what are some things that you remember? Like, do you, and what I mean by remember, this would have been told to you by a family member, like, yeah, you started walking early, or yeah, it took you longer to talk, like you wouldn't talk for a long time. Like these would be developmental milestones. That what we mean by developmental milestones. If you started reading early or you started reading late. Culture influences would be like, how was the environment you were raised around? How did it influence you? How did your culture influence you? Like, for example, if you were born in a Nigerian home, like how did the Nigerian culture influence you? Or if you were born around I'm trying to think of another culture, because we always use ethnicity as a identity aspect of culture, but there are other cultures. If you were raised in um, around a culture of skateboarders, I know that was a silly example, but skateboarding is a culture. And so like, how was that? You know, our beach goers, how did the culture influence? Do you recall how culture influenced that? Your academic history, you know, how did you do in elementary school and middle school and high school? Was it a struggle for you? Did you do well? Did you like school? Did you dislike school? What's your spiritual and religious experiences? Like how has spirituality and religion been for you? How have you experienced it? Has it been a negative experience or a positive experience? The family constellation, that would be, do you have a lot of aunts and uncles? Then grandparents, like, were your grandparents in the picture? Were both grandparents in the picture? Were you just, and then that falls in line to the nuclear family, which would be more like the family you were actually, your, what is that word that is used for because they're the extended family, and then there's the family unit. I can't think of the word I want to use, but anyway, you know, were you raised by both parents? Were both parents in the home, or was it just you? I'm sorry, I don't mean just you. I mean, like, were you raised in a single parent home? How many siblings did you have? What is your order in that with the siblings? Description of your childhood. Description of your childhood is, how do you remember your childhood? Do you remember it being lonely? Do you remember it being adventurous? Do you remember it being cold? Like, what is your memories of your childhood? What did your family value? You know, like, if you were to think about what was valued, like, what do you perceive was valued in your family? Like, for example, I know in our home, education is valued. Getting an education is something that is valued. Learning your authentic self is valued in our home. And so that would be an example. What was the family atmosphere? You know, what was the energy? Was it a tense energy? Was it warm energy? Did you have to walk on eggshells? What was the parenting style? Were your parents strict? Was it the bad cop, good cop? What do you remember about the parenting styles? And then gender models, like, how did your mom model her feminine energy? How did your dad model his masculine energy? How did your mom model her masculine energy in her? How did your dad model his feminine energy? Like, did he model that? Was he only masculine? Did he not show any warmth and comfort? Did your mom only model feminine and you never saw her being assertive and standing up for her rights or whatnot? Like, how was gender modeled in your home? And what does intimacy and relationships look like to the client? So how this would work for you is, what does intimacy and relationships look like to you? Like, how do you define what a healthy, intimate relationship looks like? And if there's any early recollections, like, is there something that stands out in your memory that happened when you were 6, 7, or 8, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that age range? So this is a lifestyle assessment. And this is something that you are going to do on yourself. And this is something that you would do when working in a counseling setting with someone. Now, because this is for a class assignment, you do not have, if there are things that feel really personal to you that you don't want to disclose to me to submit as for the assignment, you do not have to do that. You can be as general as you need to be to feel comfortable with doing this assignment, because I know that it's asking personal information. But I do think that if you feel stable and grounded enough to dive deep into these questions, I think it will help you in gaining a better understanding of self. And also that will help in your self-concept paper that you will be doing. If you have any questions about the assignment or need clarifications, of course, I will be available for you during my office hours next week, or you can contact me through Remind. Also, please don't forget that your first abstract is due on Monday. Someone set up a Dropbox for me. I'm so grateful for that in the class so that so it's easier for you to submit at least that assignment. This assignment, what I'm asking you to do, I know that there's been some difficulties with emailing it to D2L. And so I figured out an easier way, I think, for you guys is you go into the D2L course, you go into communications part, you click on discussion, and you generate a new general discussion thread, and you can post the assignment there. Okay, I hope that you have a blessed day. I hope that I didn't rush too much through the PowerPoint, but I didn't want to prolong it because, like I said, I would like for you to refer back to the book to dive a little bit more into Adler to get a better understanding of his theory. Okay, have a blessed day. Bye-bye.